Welcome on board the Richplanet starship, broadcasting from somewhere high above the Earth. I'm Richard D. Hall, and I'm going to kick things off as usual by taking a look at the week's news headlines. On Saturday, the 10th of April, Polish President Lech Kaczynski and scores of others were killed in a plane crash in Russia. Polish and Russian officials said no one had survived after the plane apparently hit trees as it approached Smolensk's airport in thick fog. Poland's army chief, central bank governor, MPs and leading historians were among the 80 passengers killed. They were flying in from Warsaw to mark 70 years since the Katyn massacre of thousands of Poles by Soviet forces. When one considers that more people die each year by being attacked by donkeys than die in plane crashes, it's hard to believe that the most important and high-ranking officials of a country would not have the best plane, pilots and safety procedures in place. Within hours of this story being reported, the BBC had the whole event comprehensively covered on its website. I's dotted, T's crossed, pilot error, fog on runway, just an accident, of course. The Iranian government said on Friday that it had designed and tested the country's third generation of domestically built centrifuges as the nation celebrated its nuclear energy achievements. Iran, a signatory of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, says its nuclear program is aimed at the peaceful use of nuclear energy. The West, however, alleges the work is for developing the capacity to build atomic bombs. Under the same Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Britain's own nuclear bomb program is illegal. The Trident program consists of 200 nuclear warheads on 4 nuclear submarines operating from the Clive Naval Base in Scotland. At least one of these submarines is always on patrol as a continuous at-sea deterrent, armed with up to 16 Trident missiles and around 48 nuclear warheads. Many believe that there is an ulterior motive for the West's aggression towards Iran, and the nuclear issue is being used as an excuse, as weapons of mass destruction were in Iraq. The Digital Economy Bill has been pushed through Parliament almost unnoticed under the radar as our news media is distracted by the general election. This bill creates new powers which enable the government to force internet service providers to block access to websites that give access to pirated material. There are fears that these new laws will in practice be used as a new form of internet censorship. The bill has been pushed by the Labour government at the request of powerful media cartels. Both the Sun and Daily Telegraph newspapers on April the 4th published articles about the strange mutilation of sheep in Shropshire. In recent months, mutilated animals with classic surgical type holes and incisions have been discovered in a region of Shropshire. Within this region, strange lights were recently witnessed and filmed by a Skywatch team led by researcher Phil Hoyle. Phil is a member of the Animal Pathology Field Unit, a research group that have been investigating similar cases in the UK for about 10 years. The film shows illuminated objects parting into multiple objects and also projecting beams of light. We will try and bring you some of this footage in a future program along with images of the mutilated animals. What is significant about the newspapers reporting these incidents is that although they have been occurring for over 10 years, up until now, no national UK newspaper has ever covered the issue, even though national newspapers have been given information about the cases. Even the farming media, such as the Farmer's Guardian, has refused to cover stories about this issue. The timing of the sudden mainstream media interest coincides with 2 parliamentary questions which my MP, Dave Anderson, has asked Agriculture Minister Jim Fitzpatrick. The questions ask, when will the Minister reply to Richard D. Hall's concerns about animal mutilation raised in his film Silent Killers? The sudden shift from media blackout to full-page national press coverage could well be a change in strategy, as ministers are now asking questions behind closed doors. Needless to say, the articles published by the 2 newspapers did not go into much detail. To find out about this phenomenon, log on to richplanet.net and click on Animal Mutilation, which will enable you to watch Silent Killers free of charge. It's time now to introduce this week's guest onto the show. Our guest this week is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers. He's an esoteric researcher and is part of the international campaign to remove central banks, including the Bank of England. So without further ado, let's activate the teleporter and get him beamed up onto the ship. It's Mark Cooking.
Hello.
Welcome onto the Starship, Mark.
Thanks for that. God, what happened there?
There you were, sitting having your dinner, and
I
suddenly
know.
you're in outer space.
Oh, well, it got me out of that, yeah.
How are you?
I'm fine, and you?
Good, very well, yes.
Good.
And we're here to talk about secret knowledge, New World Order.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have a lot of theories about secret societies and the Illuminati and where the real power in the modern world lies. But I think you contest that we need to go back to basically Jesus in order to explain what's going on in the world now. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, as any researcher knows, this goes back maybe to 10,000 years BC, whatever, or further back. It is about the history of humanity and the history of the solar system, ultimately. But yeah, I gave a talk last week, the first one I've ever given, and found myself talking about the Jesus scenario, which does sort of cast a light that I believe the truth movement need to wake up to nowadays.
So you think that the secret societies hold certain key knowledge that they've kept close to their chest for many, many years, and part of that is, the Church of Rome.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's so many different secret societies out there, as we all know, and many of them are named as being part of the New World Order scenario and the Illuminati and whatever. But many years ago, it interested me, and I did have involvements with certain societies and wisdom traditions and so on. And I saw something and was told something from within the church, let's just say, which stuck with me as a plausible story, a plausible scenario as to what was actually going on. Over the years, I obviously, with that in mind, looked for the evidence to find that and realised that it is, in fact, there. And in this current era, we have researchers who themselves have uncovered this. So I've watched it come together, but I've also watched the truth movement sort of eating itself and arguing over what's right and what's wrong, and the religious aspect interferes all the time. Yet this one piece of knowledge, which seems to be proving quite fundamentally today, is still ignored. We have people within the truth movement who, for example, are oriented towards Christianity, who by very definition, if you suggest that Jesus wasn't what they have been told he was or what they believe that he was, they will switch off, and it's very hard for this truth movement to come together because of the religious divide. And I don't mean to focus on Christianity, but all the others too, perhaps. But
Okay, so you contend that the leaders of the religions are not what they outwardly portray.
Certainly to some extent. The little scenario that I talked about the other day was who was Jesus. The religion itself is always taught he was the Son of God, and everyone knows that story. And a lot of religious or faithful Christians believe Jesus was the Son of God and the Nativity and everything that they were taught. And this has become part of their spiritual belief system. And yet, when you track this back and do any research, as I pointed out the other day, it is the most researched subject in history. You have films like Zeitgeist pointing out that there's no record of Jesus throughout history, when in fact that's wrong. The secret societies have many, and there's a lot more information out there, not within secret societies. Point being that Jesus, if you track it back, this story is, if it's not dead correct, it's certainly provably a lot more correct than the myth that has been spun. And it's around this myth that the big con is taking place today. That Jesus was of the line of the pharaohs, arguably the last of the pharaohs. in exile in Judea. At the time, he was the richest person in Judea with his sister wife, which all pharaonic kings had. They always married their sister wife.
Okay.
That means that it was his sister and he married her.
That's a pretty controversial statement for Christians, isn't it?
Well, it is
Jesus married his sister.
It's pretty controversial,
Okay.
but as I say, if any Christian cares to do their research, they will find that that is what these priests... Jesus was a priest.
Uh-huh.
That is what they did. And it was quite normal.
Mm-hmm.
That you could then argue that his wife was in fact Mary. That seems pretty provable.
Mm-hmm.
None of this can be proven,
Mm-hmm.
but the official story can be disproven
Okay.
very easily. But Jesus was of this pharaonic line. That pharaonic line had a knowledge that went right back to pre-Egyptian times.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that knowledge itself
Mm-hmm.
that's key to the conspiracy today.
Okay.
Now, I've suggested that Jesus was a revolutionary. He was, as I say, a king in exile, in waiting. He wanted to take Judea. He actually did have Judea. He was the priest king at that time. Very wealthy, formed a revolution.
Mm-hmm.
The two keys to the Bible, though, that I've mentioned, without wittering too long about this, is that the guy called Josephus, who wrote the Antiquities of the Jews,
Mm-hmm.
was in fact Paul, who wrote a lot of the Bible.
Okay.
He had a university of scribes who wrote a lot of this for him, or with him. So you have the same person actually setting up
Mm-hmm.
two different churches, both the Judaic faith.
Mm-hmm.
Rabbi Johanan,
Mm-hmm.
I think was his name, who established the Judaic faith. That was Paul,
Mm-hmm.
who established the Christian church. It was also Josephus who
Mhm.
wrote the Antiquities of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And it all happens about 40 years later than the Bible would have you believe.
Right. And do you agree that a lot of the stories in the Bible are borrowed from older religions, Egyptian religions,
Absolutely,
and perhaps pagan
clearly,
religion? And
yeah.
you know, okay.
There was one example of that, Richard, was a classic example was a few weeks ago as an MP. And now I do forget her name, but she's always been a Roman Catholic, a
Mhm.
devout Christian, and she had an hour-long documentary
Mm-hmm.
looking back at the history of the Ten Commandments. And
Okay.
her principle was that if these commandments were used today, society would be a better place. The opening lines to her documentary were that she researched this, and the Ten Commandments were, guess what, given to Moses by God on
Mhm.
top of the mountain. That
Mhm.
was the extent of her research.
Mhm.
And yet any researcher, literally within minutes of looking, will find the Ten Commandments in the Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
So it just shows the fickle amount of research that goes in and comes out on mainstream TV,
Mhm.
just to promulgate the myth.
Mm-hmm. And the secret knowledge, which is held presumably by not just the head of the Church of Rome, but presumably other secret societies, is what? Because we...
Well,
Gonna-
it has no name as such, but it's becoming known as the Hermetic Code. It's
Mhm.
based on Hermes, that's the Greek name, who is Thoth,
Mm-hmm.
that's the Egyptian name, Enoch,
Mm-hmm.
being the Judaic name.
Right.
It is the secret knowledge about life and creation. And once you know that, it also begs the question, well, how did they know that?
Mhm.
And this is really what opens up history,
Okay.
because this knowledge has been known right through to the present day,
Yeah.
currently by those that you would call the Illuminati. It is
Mhm.
how they mind control the planet.
Uh-huh. So this knowledge, I mean, is this, you say it's knowledge of creation itself, so is this
Mhm.
on a atomic level knowledge, or what would you, what is it, what is this knowledge?
There's the old adage that says, as above, so below. That's
Mhm.
the Hermetic theory.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that. It is at every single level.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose a way to explain it would be that we don't just live in a three-dimensional reality. We live in a four-dimensional reality, in real terms. And the fourth dimension not being time, you
Mhm.
could count that as a fifth maybe.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth dimension is scale.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is the secret. That
Okay.
everything on every level, from the subatomic to the universal,
Mm-hmm.
operates in exactly the same way.
Okay.
And that way is the law of octaves.
Mm-hmm.
which I'd need a little presentation here to show you. But
Well,
basically,
maybe we can go into that
Yeah.
in part two. We'll,
Sure.
we'll try and explain this law of octaves and the law of three, I think, as well,
And
as
the law
as
of
part
three.
of the same
It's
thing.
part of the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Right. Well, and what about occult knowledge? Where does that fit in? Is that the same thing?
Well, that is the occult knowledge.
Okay.
Now, obviously, over the centuries and millennia, various other organisations have established themselves. You've got your Freemasons and various others, at the peak of which this knowledge would be known. But I don't mean by 33rd degree Masons or whatever. I'm not right at the very peak.
And what's your opinion on Freemasons? Because I was actually talking to a master mason yesterday, and he said, well, anyone with half a brain can become a master mason.
Of course.
But there are groups within Freemasonry that, you know, are up to things which people at the lower levels perhaps don't know about. And is that a fair assessment?
Definitely. I can honestly say I've met many, many hundreds of Freemasons throughout my career, and none of whom are anything other than ordinary people working within the Freemasons. Whatever they believe it is, it doesn't matter. It's the institution itself at the top and the purpose for which they are manipulated that you could call Illuminati or evil or whatever you want. But the people within, I've seen too many paranoid conspiracy researchers. It's the Freemasons. Have you seen the emblems on the Freemasons and the geometry and all this? And it's taking it too far.
Yeah, I would go along with that. A lot of people focus on the symbology. Look at this emblem, look at that symbol. It's all... I don't buy into a lot of that symbology stuff, but
Well,
I do believe that at the top level of the Freemasons, you know, there's a lot of power.
There is.
And it's not for the good of everyone.
It comes down to symbology and it comes down to sacred geometry, but the point I'm making is, while everyone's out there researching this and seeing it all around them in the architecture, it literally is, what does that actually mean? What role does this play?
We're going to go for a short break now, and after the break, perhaps I'll get Mark to describe the law of octaves. Don't go away. Welcome back on board the Starship, and we're talking with Mark Cocking. And Mark is going to try and explain to us the law of octaves and law of three, which is secret knowledge, would you say, or...
I'd call it esoteric.
Esoteric knowledge.
It's not secret as such. In fact, the great irony is that it's the knowledge that was known by all thousands of years ago. So it's not so much secret. It's kept underground because, of course, human history is not what we've been told it is. Anyway, yeah, it's a hard one to do. But first of all, the law of three. This is what's referred to certainly through Christian theology as the Trinity. This is where the concept came from originally, and it is that there are three energies that create everything. There are no exceptions, and this could be from something in physical existence to a thought pattern, literally anything. The three energies combine, and you could call them passive, active, and neutral, or you could call them positive, negative, and earth, or whatever you want to call them. They do apply throughout electrical engineering and every aspect of science. And it's the interaction of those three energies that bring into creation in our 3D reality whatever it is one is trying to create, be that a human being or a plant or whatever. So it is the process of creation. So you have passive, active, and neutral energies. You can think of them as perhaps twisting together as a helix.
Okay.
Each of these energies has 7 distinct frequencies and notes, for want of a better word, at which they resonate.
7.
Yeah. And those 7 frequencies happen to be identical to what has been identified as the Western musical scale, as noted by Pythagoras originally. Well, even before him, but he majored on that.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yeah, call it do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Yeah. And the point is that if you have each energy, each of the 3 energies, with internally consisting of 7 specific frequencies. So you could think of this as a rainbow, for example. There's 7 light bands within the rainbow, 7 distinct frequencies. They do, of course, all merge across one spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
The same applies to DNA. Without
Mhm.
going into the detail here,
Mm-hmm.
it's constructed in exactly the same way,
Mm-hmm.
as is all matter, as is absolutely everything. And this is the point that I've put before scientists from every discipline over the years. Here's the theory. That's the answer to all of your questions. Tell me I'm wrong. And
Mhm.
I've pointed out none of them have ever been able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, most of them will say, hell, they see something. And the key is actually in the numbers itself. This defines numerology and many other, even astrology.
Mm-hmm.
Many other systems have come out of this. The I Ching, for example, has exactly the same numbers within it, as does every other wisdom tradition,
Right.
from Druidry to Wicca to Buddhism. They all talk about the eightfold way, the octave of creation.
Right.
Now, within each of these bands, as I say, is the 7 notes. So if
Right.
we call them Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti.
Mm-hmm.
And the next note is Do again.
Yes.
So that's your 8 notes
And
making
then
the octave.
you've gone one entire octave.
That's right. And the last note is the same as the first.
Now, in an octave, I know that when you go to the next octave, if you play A, say the note of A,
Yeah.
and then you go up an entire octave, that's a doubling of the frequency.
Double of the frequency.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then you've got this split. So carry on.
So the
this-
potential for each energy band is to double as it evolves over an octave.
Right.
And that is over time, but it could be in an instant or it could be a long-term project. Everything sort of follows this structure. And it's in the numbers, if you think about this. If you have 3 octaves, there would be 24 notes.
Yeah.
But in reality, how would you put this? Starting at A, you get first octave is A, which is a doubling of that frequency. Second octave is A,
Mm-hmm.
and the last octave is also A. The middle 2 are shared. They are both the last note of the first octave and the first note of the next octave.
Mm-hmm.
It's one and the same. So the middle 2 A's, in this case, are the same.
Right.
They therefore come out. What I'm saying is you have 22 notes. If you just
yeah,
jot
yes,
these
'cause
down,
it's
you actually have
overlapped, yes.
22.
Okay.
Now, 22 over 7 is pi. This is
Okay.
the basis of the ancient esoteric knowledge.
So there's 3 octaves that overlap. They've all got 8 in them, but they overlap on 2 sections. So that makes, instead of 3 to 24,
That's right.
it's 22.
Yeah.
Over 7 is pi.
And this is what pi actually defines.
It's not exactly 22 over 7, though, is it?
Well,
Is it?
there's a debate.
Is
The ancients always pi.
Yeah.
They didn't use that name, of
I
course.
mean, I would use that in a maths exam if you couldn't be bothered with a calculator.
it's-
22 over 7.
It's pretty damn close, but it's a good question because that actually is the key. And it's a very
Right.
hard question to answer,
So-
but
Now, when you said passive, active, and neutral, are these the octave 1, 2, and 3
No.
that overlap, or there's 3 different sets
No.
of these 22
there's a
notes?
guy called Michael Hayes. He's written about this, and,
Right.
and he really is the only author I've found who's ever written
Right.
at this sort of level. So I really recommend anyone reads his books.
Michael Hay.
Michael Hayes.
Hayes. Okay.
I don't remember the name of the book now, but
Okay.
he wrote a book about 10 years ago. Read that. And I
Mhm.
believe he's just followed up on that.
Mhm.
Read his stuff. Now, Michael will explain the 3 energies, the octave, and so on.
Mhm.
But I learned this many years ago, and I've been watching it evolve over my life and come into the public arena. What I would add to what Michael has to say is that the 3 energies actually do work together. So you have 3 distinct octaves working in a helical form, a
Right.
spiral form, as opposed to just laid out end to end. It's a very subtle difference, but
Right.
it's a key one.
So are these, for example, an electromagnetic wave, which is a wave in space, are they vibrations of space, i.e. an EM wave, or is it something smaller than that?
It's the substate that's vibrating. It's the medium in which something is vibrating. It is light, ultimately.
Okay.
Light is defined by this triple octave. I can see I'm going to have to put on a talk or something with all the visual aids here, but it's actually so simple that I showed it just on a piece of paper last week. And you could go on explaining it forever, but it is so simple that
Right.
once it's seen, it's for
Right.
the individual
Well,
to
if
work with.
you can supply me with an image and I'll overlay it and we can put it on
I'm
top
sure
of
I can do that,
Okay,
yeah.
great. So there's 3 different types of energy which each consist of 3 octaves. Is that right? Okay, which somehow produce light, or
I think
is that
perhaps-
what is the basis of light?
Perhaps we're getting a bit complex. What I'm saying is that everything
Uh-huh.
throughout creation and existence
Mm-hmm.
is made from these 3 energies
Mhm.
interacting as a triple octave.
Mm-hmm.
When it tunes itself,
Mhm.
imagine the first 7 notes are struck in the first octave.
Mm-hmm.
If you play them on a keyboard, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you'll get a dissonant sound. But what they do is all 7 are struck together and they form the 8th note.
Mhm.
Together they form the 8th note.
Okay.
So by striking the 7th, you transcend to the octave.
Mm-hmm.
By striking the next 7, you transcend to the next octave.
Okay.
And the next 7, you transcend. Now above that,
Uh-huh.
that triple octave band is our frequency band of creation. At the top you would have light speed, and at the bottom you would have absolute 0, which is
Okay.
no speed. Minus 273.2 degrees there,
Mm-hmm.
and light speed
Okay.
up there. Now I know they're 2 different scales.
Yeah.
It's the numbers that are key to this.
Right.
For at one end you have 144,000,
Mm-hmm.
which is the speed of light in arc seconds per second around
Mhm.
a sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And at the other end, you have the lowest possible temperature in the known universe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I've pointed out in things I've written, the number 2732
Mm-hmm.
and 144,000
Mm-hmm.
plus the triple octave actually decode the Bible. This is
Right.
the coding system that's used in the Bible. And people will say, ha, rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't intend to prove it to any of them.
Mhm.
I was told this many years ago
Mm-hmm.
within your secret societies, watched it all unfold and did my own research and
Mhm.
so on. And I can tell you it clearly is there.
Okay.
It was this hermetic encoding that was put into the ancient documents, some of which became the Bible.
Okay.
Long
I
story.
mean, I think I can see what you're getting at. I would need to have a look at the diagrams to start to understand it. But with regards to numerology, I'm not saying that things aren't encoded into the Bible. Maybe they are, but numerology in general, I believe, is flawed because we work on a base 10 number system, and in science, in physics,
Yeah.
if you can work on any number system, you can work on octal, hexadecimal,
Yeah.
and all of the equations still work.
Yeah.
You know, so you can work out how far it's going to, how long it's going to get to the moon or whatever what you want. It all works on any number bit. The thing with numerology, you move over to hexadecimal or octal, it all falls apart. For example, so someone will take the year 1968
Yeah.
and they add up all of the digits in it and they make another number and then they do this and then they say, oh, well, look, there's symbology in it because of this. Doesn't work because if you go to another number system, it all falls apart. So this is why generally the whole of numerology, for as far as I'm concerned, is completely flawed because it won't work in another number system like physics does.
If I could convert it for you into any other number system, though.
Yeah,
would you
yeah. Oh,
convert
yes. I would then.
You reciprocate 81.
Okay.
That's the key to actually decoding numerology. Again,
What
this
1 divided by 81?
1 over 81.
Okay.
That creates the decimal system that you're talking about.
Mhm.
And 81 you will find in all those physics equations that you mentioned before
Right. Okay.
as a constant.
Right.
All right.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
you see, we're going to areas that you talk about.
Yeah, I mean,
about.
it's
a bit
difficult
confusing
to-
in a conversation.
yeah, to get to the bottom of it in a 30-minute interview. But I certainly need to go away and have a look at this. It is quite intriguing. So you're saying that's the basis of space or the basis of matter?
I'll summarise it for you. At some point in the distant past, the entire knowledge of the universe, in physics, call it that, of science and spirituality was known. Jesus was a teacher of that, the Pythagorean school, quite provably it tells you in the Bible. And that's what's been suppressed since the time of Jesus.
Okay then, Mark. Well, we'll come back to all of
Sure.
this in part 3, and because it's time for the Artist of the Week. Now, this band have only been playing together for 4 months, and they actually have less members in their band than the legendary Rush, because there's only 2 of them. Brandon Randall, who's only aged 13, on drums, and Andy Dove, aged 16, on guitars. And they've produced this video themselves, and I'm honoured because the track was written specially for this show. So here it is. It's called Richplanet by the band Not Peart. Welcome back on board the Starship, and we are joined by the Starship pet, Ulysses. Now, it's time for the interesting person of the week. And this week it's Sam Wright, who runs the Probe UFO conference in Lytham St Anne's next to Blackpool. And he's speaking here about two stories told by previous speakers at the conference.
A chap named Al Fassbender, who was a captain in Vietnam. And he tells the story of the last days of the war when a general came in and he said, right, we've got to go behind the lines to pick 5 soldiers up. And he had 2 heavily armed guards with him. And he thought, this is a bit queer, a general going behind the lines just to pick 5 soldiers up. Anyway, he didn't argue with them. And they went behind the lines. They landed at this place about 200 yards from the actual jungle itself. And they seen these soldiers, they were in disguise sort of thing, they're all black, and he called them over, you know, and they came walking towards him. They got within about 10 yards and he said to these 2 guards, fire, and they shot them dead. He said, I went berserk, why did you shoot these soldiers dead? He said, there's a reason. So he said to the guards, turn them on the back and wash the faces. So he turned them on the back and he washed the faces and he called him over. He said, look, they were clones. He said he had 20 clones in Vietnam in the last few weeks of the war, and they went in groups of 5, and the first 15 had been killed within a few days, and these 5 were the only survivors. And he said they couldn't take them back because they have implants in the head, and all as they taught is to kill. They killed men, women and children, animals. That's all they did. So they actually killed them there and buried them, you know. That was another fascinating story.
And if you think that you might be interesting or have interesting tendencies, then we'd like to hear from you. So if you can make a YouTube clip of you being interesting and then send me a link to starship@richplanet.net. You can talk about anything you like as long as it's interesting. And that brings me to this week's interesting scientific fact of the week. And that is, we mentioned it earlier, that more people are killed annually by donkeys than are killed in plane crashes. Okay, well, thank you very much, Ulysses. We'll put you back in your cosmic hutch. Right, and back to Mark, where we're gonna change the subject slightly and talk about.
Can I have a carrot?
talk about the banking system, because you worked for a bank for many years, didn't you, Mark? And then you became slightly disillusioned over time as to the rules, and basically the entire system was brought into question.
Yeah.
So tell me why and when you began to sort of question the ethos of the banking system.
In the early days, really, when I was a newcomer in the industry, I went in straight from school. And started studying for associateship with the Chartered Building Societies Institute. So just exams after exams, really, postgraduate degrees or whatever level it is. And within that, it's actually hard to explain because it wasn't a great moment, it wasn't a great event, it wasn't a blinding flash, it was just this feeling that all was not right. And when you ask questions about the issuance of the currency itself, there was a big black wall, you know, bang.
You would ask people, so where does new money come from?
Where does it come from?
Yeah.
You know,
and
what gives
these?
What gives the bank, whatever that means, the right to issue this? You know, because actually we could issue our own, and none of these banks are needed, other than as functional systems where you can pay your money in and use, you know, but even then they're not needed. We could design our own. So having begged that question, I realized there was no official answer. So I pursued that a bit further.
Because a lot of the people within the banking world actually operate in this box, which they follow their own rules and they don't actually know where new money comes from.
No. The first rule of the Financial Services Authority in the UK is nobody that has a license to work within the financial field can actually undermine the system itself, the economic system. If you're seen to be criticising it, pointing out that the Financial Services Authority is corrupt, or at least ineffective, pointing out that the central bank is the biggest scam in history, the second you start touching on this, the Financial Services Authority can just pull your licence. Or harass you, or do whatever they want to do. So that they're protecting these secrets. But they're not great secrets, because they're actually glaringly obvious to anyone who stops to think about it. But as soon as banks and money are mentioned, people do switch off. They're taught to.
And just to summarise, basically, the Bank of England loans money to our government at interest. And really, you could completely change that system, give the government control over its own currency. It can issue its own currency, write off its debt completely. Therefore, the interest that we pay in our income tax, which is interest on government debt, which is 1/3 of all income tax paid is government, goes on interest on government debt. You could write that off, get rid of that straight away tomorrow.
Entirely, yeah. There's a very plausible case to prove that, in fact, all tax in the UK is used to pay interest on the loans, but that's a debatable point. The point is that it's a huge chunk. So simply by removing them from the equation, you could overnight reduce income tax by at least 30%. And this is in these times of recession as well. The reason that's not happening is because the, let's just say, elite people in control of this want to scam you. This is why they're so rich.
Yeah, the central banks have been cajoled into the hands of private individuals who then loan money to governments and therefore pull the strings of governments. I mean, to me, it's bloody obvious, this whole financial scandal and why this recession has probably been orchestrated.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll put to you a financial system that I think is possibly plausible. The first is that you get rid of the central bank and governments issue their own currency. You then get rid of interest rates. Now, people will say, no, you've got to have interest rates. But if you get rid of interest rates, you then get rid of inflation, and therefore you don't actually need a bank to put your money in because its value will never reduce. Right. So, you know, essentially, interest rates is people making money out of money, which is essentially immoral because they've not created anything tangible or of worth.
That's right. Inflation only happens because that money was loaned to the government in the first place. That's all that causes inflation. So you'll have an economist coming up with all different theories and words to explain it, but that's all it comes to.
And essentially, it's interest rates and loaning of money which creates these oscillations in the economy when in essence, you could smooth those waters by getting rid of interest completely and having money loaned via the government.
Yeah.
I mean,
if anyone wants to look at my website, which is just myname.co.uk, we have a campaign that we have websites around the world, End the Bank of England in the UK, End the Fed in America, and promoting the mathematically perfected economy, which actually proves mathematically how to sustain an economy. One can still charge interest within it, but obviously it's at much lower rate. Ultimately, though, the secret, in my opinion, is to remove interest altogether.
Yeah.
But the mathematically perfected economy actually has been driven at the American government for 30 years. They know this is the answer.
So you would have a system whereby you need, say, £100,000 to buy a house. You go to the government sends someone out or an agent of some kind. They then set up that loan. They think, yeah, you can pay so much a week for 10 years. They give you that loan at no interest because we own the currency. Our government owns the currency. That is then paid back. If you default on that, then you would then have a marker put against your name that you can't loan any more money. And that would mean that none of the interest that people make money from would be going into the hands of people who don't actually do any work, i.e. bankers, because they don't create any wealth. So by getting rid of interest, you get rid of making money from money and out of money.
And therefore wealth happens within the community as a natural...
You can still have shares in companies in a capitalist-driven economy, but you get rid of interest, therefore you wipe out the entire group of leeches that live off the rest of us.
It is all very simple. You'll have socialists and conservatives and all sorts of political types confusing the issue with their economic theories, all of which ultimately are rubbish. Because if anyone hasn't seen through the political scam nowadays, they're all controlled by the same organisations, both Tories and Labour, out there at the minute giving their policies for the next general election, and yet all of those policies, or most of them, were written by the same organisation for both parties, by Demos. It's all a scam.
And they like to use the high street banks as sort of whipping boys for their, oh, look at the bonuses that they're giving each other, but they never go near the central bank, do they?
No. And the public are up in arms about what the bankers have done, but bankers to the British public means Barclays and Lloyds and all of these others, and that's all it means, not the central bank. The issue has been, once again, deflected onto a few greedy bankers who, yes, were way out of order, but they're taking the flak. They're the ones who, well, literally are taking the flak for the collapse of the economy, and it wasn't them, it lays beyond them.
And just to go over to the United States for a moment, this is what President Kennedy wanted to do, wasn't it, before he was assassinated?
Well,
he wanted to get rid of the Federal Reserve.
This is why
because he saw then in the 60s that it was a con.
Yeah, this is why none of the politicians in this country will actually back, even if they wanted to, they can't back getting rid of the Bank of England because they will be either assassinated or they'll have a car crash or whatever, or they'll just lose their career. They will be pressured, if not killed.
Yeah.
Therefore, that's why I've said it's down to the people to do this. And And that sort of ties in with the Hermetic Code that we talked about earlier, because that secret, which has come right through the time since the church was established and so on, also provides the answer insofar as you have an occult, esoteric order running the world, or let's just say directing the world, in a very simple fashion, according to this Hermetic law that I touched on before. And therefore, by definition, because that is occult and it is it's a spiritual knowledge that they're working with against us, we can turn that. It's one of the principles of the occult, is that they can't defend against their own system. So all we've got to do is wise up to how they're doing it and use it against them. So I have put forward proposals as to how the people in this country can do that. And I'm utterly convinced it can't actually fail. We don't have to do much.
And you've got details of that on your website,
yeah? Yeah, I've written about it. It's a formative idea. It's not for me to say this is exactly what we should do, but people are coming in with their ideas now.
And just to go back to the Bank of England, because we think that's probably one of the key things that needs to be gained control of. The people, in the form of our own government, a government of the people, needs to take control of its own currency, which it currently doesn't have. So who owns the Bank of England? Because this is a question that some people just say, well, it's the government. Is it the government?
Okay, it's dead simple. Talk about the Fed in America as a private institution, all right? Talk about the Bank of England in the UK, and it's a nationalised institution. But there is a twist there, and this is where people get thrown. It was nationalised in 1946, but it has shareholders. So if you can show me any nationalised industry that actually has private shareholders, the identity of which is kept secret by statute.
Because it's a royal charter or something it's created under.
So what you have is a confusing legal mess, really, and the whole thing is a front. The accounts, for example, show that profits are paid to the Treasury. But it doesn't quite work that way. If you read the small print, it's all very confusing, but the official answer is it's nationalised. It is therefore theoretically owned by the British public, but it is not, and that much is provable.
I mean, this is what I find about other aspects of the financial world, that it's made deliberately confusing, and you get these financial experts saying, oh, it's not as simple as that, it's far more complicated than that. And this is one of the reasons why it's made complicated, so that you can't see through this bloody scam.
Exactly. I've never met a financial expert who could, seems to have the ability to sum things up in plain, simple language. They go way beyond that. But anything that they tell you, as supposed financial experts, actually is classroom level stuff. They just make it sound complex because that's what they're paid to do. It makes them feel important.
And one of the things that we saw fairly recently was quantitative easing, where the central bank creates a whole load of money from nothing, effectively. Tell us about that, Mark, because I'm sure you can...
Well, the collapse, the banks collapsed, so the excuse was that the people, the taxpayer, has to bail them out, which is nonsense, because we didn't have to do that. We could have let them go under, because we didn't need them in the first place anyway. But you were told there'd be a complete economic global collapse if we didn't do it. Utter lie. And I say that to the Prime Minister. He is lying. He's bold-faced lie. Because what he could have done was raise that money and paid off every debt in the UK for the people. Which would have quantitatively eased the situation. But no, what they did was borrowed money from the bankers, hundreds of billions, and then gave it back to them. So that you and I and our children and grandchildren have to pay that back. It's the ultimate scam,
and
the ultimate
crime.
devalues
everybody's money by the fact that there's more money in the system.
It will go pop. And everyone's trying to guess when. No one can say when, because there are so many factors. But what one can say with certainty is that we're destined for hyperinflation and the collapse of the pound and the dollar. But that is all planned, because they will then suck us into a European or global currency.
A European or global currency, and you think that's possibly what's on the agenda?
I know it is.
Okay, then,
if you haven't noticed, it's out there, and that's what they're forcing us to do.
Well, thanks indeed very much
My
for
pleasure.
coming, Mark. It's been fascinating talking to you. And just to say finally, keep your eyes on the skies and your feet on the ground, and tell all your friends about this show.